Shabbos Daf Chaf Tes begins right after a Mishnah. It takes us to another Mishnah and ends with a third Mishnah. In the first Mishnah, which we've seen at the end of the Daf yesterday, we saw a machlokes. We saw a double machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Akiva, and we're going to have two explanations for each of the two machlokes. One set for each we've already seen, and now we're going to see another explanation for each of the two machloksin. Along the way, we will spend some time discussing the halachas of nolad and whether or not such objects are muktzah. Now, this will take us to the next Mishnah, which discusses if you have a device set up which adds oil to an existing burning flame, you're allowed to remove that device? Well, you're not allowed to, and when did we make a gzeira that you should not set up such a device at all? This will bring us into a discussion of malacha that you didn't have kavana to do, like dragging a bench through dirt on Shabbos, and it's a machlokes of Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, and we will try to nail down what exactly the case of that machlokes is. And this will take us to the last Mishnah, which ends the daf, which discusses the situations in which putting out a fire is considered to be a malacha tzricha legufa, meaning it is performed for the purpose in which it was done in the Mishkan, and it is asa d'oraisa. So let us begin the daf. Now, yesterday we learned a Mishnah which discussed the situation in which you made a wick out of a piece of cloth. The cloth was, we aren't sure what size, but it was enough to be mekabel tumah. And what you did is you did one of the two steps to convert a cloth to wick. You rolled it up, you twisted it up, but you didn't scorch it yet, which is what's needed to make it into a wick. So the two machlokes are, first of all, is it mekabel tumah still, or is it now a wick which is not mekabel tumah? Rabbi Elazar says it is mekabel tumah, and Rabbi Akiva says it's not. And the second question was, are you allowed to use it to light Shabbos candles? Rabbi Elazar said no, and Rabbi Akiva said yes. So yesterday we had an explanation for each of those two machlokes. So I'm not going to rehash them, but we will say that the machlokes about whether or not you're allowed to use it to light Shabbos candles was stated by Rav Ada bar Ava according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yosef had commented on that, and now we understand why there is a halacha involving a square of cloth which is exactly 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim, because that's how Rav Ada bar Ava explained it. So now the Gemara says, hold on a second. How could Rav Ada bar Ava say that both these Tanaim and the Mishnah hold like Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana? It's not true. Rav Ada bar Ava himself does not hold like Rabbi Yehuda. We will get into the details of what Rabbi Yehuda holds shortly. So the Gemara says, no, he doesn't hold like Rabbi Yehuda, but he was explaining this Mishnah that these two Tanaim do hold like Rabbi Yehuda, even though he himself disagrees. Now, the Gemara offers an alternate explanation as to what the machlokes is about. Why can't I use it? What is the machlokes about as to whether or not I'm allowed to use this rolled up cloth as a wick to light Shabbos candles or not? The Gemara now says that Rava says the machlokes is pretty simple. The question is, does it burn properly or not? If you haven't scorched it yet, does it burn well? And that's what they're arguing about. If it doesn't burn well, you can't use it because we're afraid you'll adjust it on Shabbos. Now, the Gemara says, but hold on a second. Rabbi Yosef was all happy with the last explanation because now he understood the halacha that involved a square of cloth which is exactly 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim. But if you're taking that explanation away and giving a different one, so what was that halacha that he was trying to find which involved a cloth which is exactly 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim? So the Gemara says what he was referring to was the following halacha. The question is, a cloth which is exactly 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim, is that mekabel tumah or not? In order to be mekabel tumah, it has to be useful. Now, the cloth which is that size is useful for a poor person to patch his clothing. The question is, though, if it's exactly 3 tvachim, then maybe it's not really so useful because you have to make a hem, you have to fold the cloth around the edges. So that'll use up part of the 3 tvachim. Maybe you really need to have bigger than 3 tvachim so that you have space to fold it when you sew it down. So that was the discussion Rabbi Yosef was referring to. It's actually a machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim. The Chachamim say 3 by 3 exact is enough to be functional, and therefore it is mekabel tumah because you do not have to leave space for the hem. And Rabbi Shimon says no, you have to leave space to fold it. If it's exactly 3 by 3, it's not functional. It has to be bigger than 3 by 3 to be useful as a patch because you have to be able to fold down the edge. The Gemara now takes a bit of a detour and it discusses the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that we had mentioned earlier. Now, their machlokes is as follows. It's about the subject called nolad. Nolad means you had an object whose function changed on Yom Tov. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it changed from one function to another on Yom Tov, it's called nolad, and it's forbidden for you to use that object for the remainder of Yom Tov. According to Reb Shimon, it's permitted. Now, the Gemara is going to quote 3 cases in which this machlokas plays out. The Gemara will explain why we need each of the 3 to be stated. Then the Gemara will show that one of them was not explicitly stated, it was learned from an incident, and the Gemara will have some questions about it. So let's see it. The Gemara says as follows. This machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon applies in the following 3 cases. You have 3 objects whose function changed on Yom Tov, and you want to know, are you allowed to throw it in the fire and use it as firewood? In all these 3, Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to, it's forbidden because it's nolad, and Rabbi Shimon says it is permitted. What are these 3 things? A kli, a vessel which broke. It used to be useful in the vessel that it was. Now it's just a shard, which has other functions, but not quite the same. That's one case. Another is the pit of a date. It used to be functional because it was part of the fruit. It was considered to be a date. Now it's just a piece of trash. And the third one is the shell of a nut. Again, it used to be part of the food, and its function was that it was considered to be a fruit, and now it has no function. In all of these, Rabbi Yehuda says you are not allowed to use it as firewood, and Rabbi Shimon says you are, because its function change is not a problem according to Rabbi Shimon, but it is according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara says, why do I need you to tell me all these 3 things? And the Gemara says, for the following reason. If you would have only told me the case of the kli which broke, so there was an actual transformation in the shape and the function of the kli. It went from being a whole kli to a broken kli. However, in the case of the date pit, the pit never actually changed. The pit was a pit all along. It became a different function because of the fruit that was eaten around it. But I may think that that would not be considered a change according to Rabbi Yehuda, would be permitted. Therefore, you need to tell me that. And if you would have told me that, I would not know the case of the nut, because in that case, the pit really did change. It was hidden inside the fruit. Now it's exposed, it's revealed, but the shell was a shell all along. Why should be that much of a difference if it's attached to the fruit and then it comes off? And therefore, you need to tell me that no. In all these cases, it used to be considered fruit, and now it's considered to be garbage, and therefore its function has changed, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not allowed to use it as firewood. Now the Gemara says, these halachos were not explicitly said. It was learned from an incident. It's Rav who said it, and it was an incident that happened. Rav was once eating some dates, and he threw the pits into the oven that it should burn, into the fireplace. It should burn as a fire. Now Rabbi was there, and he said, you should know you're not allowed to do that on Yom Tov. So that's where Rav learned that it would be forbidden to do that on Yom Tov according to Rabbi Yehuda, because the function changed and it becomes nolad. Now the Gemara says, wait a second, how do you know that Rav agreed to Rabbi Chia? Rabbi Chia told him that, who says he accepted it? So the Gemara says, well, we have the following incident, which actually shows that he did not accept it. And that's when Rav came to Bavel on Yom Tov. He ate some of the tamarim, the dates, and he actually threw the pits to the animals, which is also called using it. Now, why was he allowed to do that? If he agreed with what Rabbi Chia said, he should have understood that they were now called nolad and forbidden to use. So the Gemara says, well, it depends what kind of pit it was. The Persian pits, the fruit comes off very easily, and the pit is left with no fruit on it at all. So then you're right, it's real garbage, and he wouldn't be allowed to throw it to the animals according to Rabbi Chia, and if he had accepted it from him, he wouldn't have. However, it's not what he ate. He was eating Aramean fruit, the dates of which the fruit does not come off the pit completely. There's still some fruit stuck to the pit. Therefore, it's not completely nolad. It still has fruit on it. It's still considered fruit, and he's allowed to throw it to the animals. Therefore, even though he agreed with Rabbi Chia that a pit which has no fruit on it is functionless and you cannot use it to feed animals, however, you are allowed to use this one because there's still fruit stuck on it. Now there's a question here. We said that Rabbi Yehuda holds you aren't allowed to use a broken kli to fuel the fire because it's nolad. Its function has changed, now it's trash. But hold on a second. He also said that if you take a real kli, a whole unbroken kli, you are allowed to throw that in the fire because it's not nolad. It's a kli all along. But once you put it in the fire, then it becomes garbage. It's not functional as a kli anymore. So you would be forbidden to do anything. You would be forbidden to turn the fire, stoke the fire, all these things that you're allowed to do on Yom Tov. But you can't now because that stuff is in there and now that has become nolad. So the Gemara says, how could you ever throw things in the fire? You wouldn't be allowed to stoke the fire afterwards. So the Gemara says, well, it's like Rav Masna's halacha. If the majority of the things in the fire are not nolad, then you are allowed to stoke the fire. Rav Masna's case was branches that fell off a tree straight into a fireplace on Yom Tov. So those are definitely nolad. But Rav Masna says you're allowed to add wood to it so that it becomes the minority of the fuel in the fire, and then you're allowed to stoke it. And therefore, the same malacha would apply over here. Now, this ends a discussion about Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon's machlokas. Now, the Gemara goes back to the Mishnah, where we had a machlokas about a piece of cloth which you made into a wick. Does it still be makabel tuma or not? Rabbi Elazar said yes, and Rabbi Akiva said no. And now the Gemara has a new explanation for what this machlokes is about. Now, the Gemara says this is actually a machlokes which we've seen elsewhere. The Gemara quotes the Brisa. It's a bit of a complex sugya, and the Gemara explains it, but we'll combine the two. The discussion is, if you have a cloth which is less than 3 tefachim by 3 tefachim, so it's not really big enough to be considered to be a garment in its own right. Whether or not it's considered a garment is kind of depending on the owner's idea of it. Does he intend to use it as a cloth, as a garment, or does he intend to use it as a shmata for not really significant uses? If he intends to use it, so then it's considered to be a garment, then it is makabel tuma. If he intends that it should just become a rag used as a shmata, then it's not makabel tuma. So the discussion over here is where he used it as a shmata, but then he put it away. And the question is, his putting it away, does that make it significant? Does that show that he values it and he still considers it to be clothing, even though he used it once as a shmata? So the Brisa discusses the case. You have somebody who used a piece of cloth. He used it to plug up the pipes into a bathhouse, or he used it as an oven mitt, or he used it to clean a millstone. All these things are using it as a rag, but then he went and he put it away. So is a throughway machlokes tanaim, is his act of putting away considered to be significant enough to show that he wants it and he considers it clothing, and therefore it is makabel tuma. So the issue centers around where he put it away, and there are 4 levels of where he may have put the object. Okay, the most insignificant level is if he took the object and he threw it in the trash heap. We'll call that level 1. That everybody agrees he did not intend to keep it as clothing, and it's not makabel tuma. The next level is where he put it behind the door, not really keeping it very well. That case, only one of the 3 Tanaim holds that it's considered to be significant and he's keeping it and it's clothing, and that is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva disagree, and this will be the case, which we will say in the end, is the machlokes, possibly, in our Mishnah, as to this cloth, which was used as a wick, whether or not it is makabel tuma or not. Because here you see, Rabbi Eliezer holds that if you put it behind the door, it retains its significance as cloth and it is makabel tuma, and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua hold it does not. Now that was level 2. Level 3 is where you hung it on a hook. So here, Rabbi Akiva switches sides, and he says, okay, that's already considered to be significant. I agree with Rabbi Eliezer, and it is makabel tuma. Rabbi Yeshua says no, this still does not count as being significant. The only case which is called significant use and shows that he values it as clothing is the 4th level, where he put it in a drawer. There, all 3 Tanaim agree that that's a significant use. It shows that he values it, and it is makabel tuma from then on. Now the Gemara has some explanation about the language. The 2 middle cases, case level 2 is called Einei Muchan, and level 3 is called Muchan. The Gemara explains that level 3 is more Muchan than level 2 and 1, and level 2 is Einu Muchan because it's less Muchan than level 3 and 4. It's just a linguistic issue. So now we have over here clearly that the case where it was put behind the door would seem to fit in very well with our Mishnah, and that's a case of a cloth, which could be the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says that's not really all of it, because what actually happened was that Rabbi Akiva changed his mind, and he ended up paskening like Rabbi Yeshua, and therefore, even in the case of where it's hanging on the hook, he also says that that's not called significant enough to be considered to be clothing, and that is not makabel tuma either. So both the cases of behind the door and hanging on the hook are now machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. Now the Gemara says, how do you know that Rabbi Akiva changed his mind and pasken like Rabbi Yeshua? The Gemara says, because if you look carefully at the wording of our Mishnah, what they're arguing about has to be where it was hung on a hook, because it doesn't say psila shel beged, that we made this wick by tearing off a piece from a piece of clothing. It says psilas habeged, a wick of clothing. That means that the case that they're arguing about is still significantly clothing to some extent. It's not just a shard, a shred torn off a piece of clothing. That has to be where it was hung on a peg. So that must be the case that they're arguing about, and therefore Rabbi Akiva must disagree with Rabbi Eliezer in that case, and he must have therefore changed his mind to like Rabbi Yeshua, that case is not makabel tuma, because Rabbi Eliezer clearly holds that it is. This takes us to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah discusses a whole new subject, which is talking about removing oil that is set up to be burned. Now the halacha is as follows: if you have oil that's in a lamp and there's a wick and it's burning, you take some of the oil out on Shabbos, you violate an iser d'oraisa of putting out the flame, even though the flame doesn't go out. as a machlokes. Why? We're going to go with the opinion of the Rosh that the problem is that it'll go out sooner than it would have done otherwise. You make it go out sooner. You've caused it to go out sooner by taking some of the oil away. Now, the Mishnah discusses three situations in which you had a reservoir of oil that was rigged to feed into an existing oil lamp. It wasn't actually oil that was in the lamp where the candle was burning, where the flame was. It was pouring oil in. And the first two are very similar. That's so you have an eggshell filled with oil with a little hole in it, and the oil is it's suspended above the lamp and it's dripping oil into the lamp. The next one is that you have the exact same thing, except instead of being an eggshell, it's a earthenware cup. And the third case is where you don't have anything suspended. You have two bowls. One bowl has the wick burning in it, and that wick extends from that bowl, the unlit end of the wick extends into the bowl that's near it, which is an additional reservoir which will draw oil into the wick when the first bowl finishes. Now the Gemara says all these three you're not allowed to set this up, because the problem is that all these three it's likely that you will come to take some of the oil away, because the oil that in the reservoir that's feeding the candle is not really in there, and therefore you may decide you want it, you may use it, and you'll end up taking the oil away, and that would be violating the Isser D'Oraisa because you're causing the candle to go out sooner than it otherwise would have. Now, all this is the opinion of the Chachamim, the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Yehuda, however, disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we're not afraid you're going to take some of it away, it's not a problem. But then the Gemara adds one case in which even the Rabbanan say that it's mutter, and that's if the device was originally made this way. The suspended reservoir was part of the candle, and it was set up that way originally by the expert pottery maker. He set it up that there are two cups and one feeds into the other. In that case, the Chachamim agree you're not going to take the oil away because you can see that it was designed as a reservoir, you'll remember, and you're not going to say, hey, that's some good oil, I would like to use that oil on Shabbos. You'll remember that it's set up for the candle and you can't take it away. Okay, the Gemara begins by asking, why do I need all three cases in the Mishnah, since they're all the same machlokes? And the Gemara says, well, in the case of the suspended reservoir where it's hanging above the lamp, so you have to tell me the one where it's made out of clay and the one where it's made out of an eggshell. Because the one where it's clay, the oil becomes disgusting. Therefore, it's less likely that you're going to use it. So if you would only tell me that case, so then I would think that's the case where Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutter. But in the case of the eggshell, where the oil is not disgusting, maybe Rabbi Yehuda says it's aser. And if you only tell me that case, that's where the Chachamim say that it's aser, because it's likely you'll take the oil. But in the case of the clay cup, then you won't take the oil. Therefore, you have to tell me both of those cases. Now, you also have to tell me the case where it's in a separate bowl, because over there it is more likely that you'll take it away. You don't even see so much, you don't even observe, you can't readily see that it's set up to feed oil into the lamp. So I might think that in that case Rabbi Yehuda would say that it's aser because you're more likely to take the oil away. And if you'd only tell me that case, of course I wouldn't know the case of suspended that the Chachamim say over there that is aser. I might think, well, there it's hanging right there, you can see the oil dripping in to the lamp, and therefore they would not say that is aser. Therefore the Gemara has to tell me both sets of cases, and of course I need all three. Now the Gemara has a brief steer over here. Our Mishnah had said that in order for it to be mutter, in the case where the cup is hanging, it has to be set up that way originally by a professional potter. We have a brisa that says that the homeowner himself can attach it with clay, and the Gemara resolves the steer that says, okay, it's got to be done in a professional manner. It could be the homeowner himself as long as he does a professional job. Now the Gemara quotes a brisa which shows how Rabbi Yehuda arrived at his decision that you do not have to make a gzeira that somebody may come to take the oil away. He says that I was spending Shabbos in the upper floor of the house of Nitzah in the city of Lud, and this is what we did. They set up an eggshell in this way, that there was oil, and it was a hole, and it dripped in, and Rabbi Tarfon and all the Chachamim were there, and nobody said that it's aser, so there you clearly see that it's mutter. So the Gemara says the Chachamim were not impressed, they said it's not a proof. Nitzah was a very chashav a person, he was a Zorez, he would never make a mistake, and therefore there's no decree against him. However, in a normal situation, there is a decree. Now the Gemara has a similar incident which involves somebody by the name of Ovin from Tzipayri, but it's about a different sugya. It's about the issue of dragging a chair on the floor. So the halacha is that you're not allowed to dig a furrow in the ground on Shabbos, that would be an isser of plowing. It's a malacha d'oraisa. Now, if you drag a bench or you drag a chair, you may dig a furrow by accident. Now, if you didn't intend to dig the furrow, so machlokes Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda if it's permitted or not. Rabbi Shimon says it's called davar she'eino miskavin, and even if you dig a furrow, it's mutter, it's not a problem. And Rabbi Yehuda says if you end up digging a furrow, it would be asur. It would be an isser. So the question over here was, what about in an upper floor where it's a hard floor? So you're definitely not going to dig. But do we have to say that if we let you dig up there, you're going to end up digging on the ground floor, which is soft earth, and you may come to dig a furrow or not? So the Gemara has this story here that Avon of Tzipore was on an upper floor, and it was in the presence of Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar, and he dragged a bench. And Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar said, if I let you do that and I don't say anything, then what's going to end up happening is the same thing that happened to Rabbi Yehuda. You're going to come to the conclusion that it's mutter, just like he did. But it's not, because you may end up, if you do this, you may end up dragging a bench on the ground floor. And that might dig a furrow, and that would be also according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the Gemara here has a machlokes between Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbah and Ula, as to what exactly was the case of the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Now, again, the machlokes was, are you allowed to drag a chair or a bench of sorts over soft earth, which may or may not make a furrow, but either way, if it makes a furrow, you do not intend for it to happen. Rabbi Shimon says it's mutter, it's a davar she'eino miskavin. If you didn't intend for it to happen, that's mutter for you to do on Shabbos. Now, the question is as follows. If it's a big, heavy object like a bench, I can understand that you would need to drag it, and maybe we would allow you to. But if it's a soft, light object, so then why would you drag it? You can pick it up. So why would we allow you to drag it if you didn't need to? So the question is, where is the machlokes? According to Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbah, the machlokes is only in the case of a heavy object. A light object, there is no machlokes. Rabbi Shimon agrees that it's asur because we didn't have to allow you to do that. According to Ula, no, it's the other way around. In the case of a light object, there's a machlokes. But in the case of a heavy object, Rabbi Yehuda himself agrees that it's mutter. So again, the question is, where's the machlokes? Is the machlokes in the harder case, where it's a heavy object, but in the light object, Rabbi Shimon agrees that it's asur? Or is the machlokes in the case of the light object, but in the heavy object, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that it's mutter, because you have to. There's no other way of making this happen. So now the Gemara has questions on both of these opinions here. So the Gemara asks, we have a brisa which says that the machlokes is in a case of dragging a bed, a chair, or a bench. Now, a bed is a big heavy object, and a chair is a light small object. So since the machlokes is clear in both cases, both Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbah and Ula are wrong, because they each say that the machlokes is only in one case. Sources, they'll each explain how it fits with them. Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbah will say, no, the machlokes is only by a heavy object. And when we said chair here, we meant a very particularly heavy chair. And Ula would say, no, the machlokes is only by a light object. And we said a bed, we meant a very light, movable bed, similar to the chair. Now the Gemara rejects the shita of Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbah based on a brisa Mishnah actually, which discusses the halacha of shatnez. Now, shatnez is clothing which is forbidden to be worn, and it's only asur if it's worn in a way that it serves you, that it protects you from the rain or from the sun. However, somebody who's a garment merchant is allowed to model the clothing as long as he's not getting any benefit out of it. Now, what if he is getting benefit out of it, but he doesn't intend to? So, Reb Shimon would say there that, again, it's a davar she'eino miskavin. He just intends to show it off to people who might be interested in purchasing it. He does not intend to have it protect him from the rain or from the sun or from the cold. So it's mutter. But the Mishnah notes that people who are very worried about the halacha would hang it on a hook. They wouldn't wear it. They would hang it up on a stick. So the Gemara says, now, it's very easy to hang it up on a stick. That's like dragging a small chair, and yet Rabbi Shimon still says it's mutter. Obviously, you see that Rabbi Shimon holds it even in a case where it's easy, like dragging a small chair, it's mutter, and that refutes Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbah's understanding of Rabbi Shimon, and the Gemara agrees that is correct. It is a good refutation. Now we get to the next Mishnah, which discusses another machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. It doesn't specifically mention their names here, but it's about something called malach she'eino tzricha l'gufa. And that's where you did a malach on Shabbos, you did work, you knew what you were doing. However, the purpose of your doing the work is not the same as the one which it was performed for in the Mishkan. And therefore, you're not doing it for the right reason. It could be that you're not chayav deraisa for that. It's not a deraisa violation. So the Mishnah discusses putting out a fire, a lamp. So it says that the following reasons are not considered to be an Issur D'Oraisa because you're not doing it, you're not putting out the lamp for the reason that it was put out in the building of the Mishkan, and these are those reasons. If you put out the lamp because you're afraid of the Goyim who have a law that you're not allowed to light a light on their holidays, or if you're afraid that you'll be caught by listim, by robbers, or if you're in a very bad mood, you're very depressed, and the light bothers you, you're healed from your mood when you can't see, or it's so that a sick person could fall asleep. All these cases is called malacha she'nitzricha legufa. It's not the right reason, and therefore you're not chayav d'oraisa. However, if you do it because you're trying to save oil, or you're trying to save the wick, then you are chayav d'oraisa. That does count as the right reason. Now, Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says that all these are not chayav d'oraisa, except in the case of the wick, because by putting out the flame, you make charcoal. This is the end of the Mishnah.